Okay. Mm.
Hi, Jasur, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Rishi. How about yourself?
Really, really good. Good to see you once again. So,
Same,
for
same.
all my audience, as you probably are aware now, we have made multiple videos in China, in Bali, Indonesia, and few while I'm in the UK and he's in China. So, yeah, it's just, myself and Jasur, we go a long way back. Probably what, 7 years now, maybe 6, 7 years.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
been
yeah. Seven,
a
8 years.
while,
Yeah.
7 years. And then, we used to collaborate and cooperate quite a bit. He's my business partner from Uzbekistan originally, but living in China for the last 13, 14 years. So just sort of good to see you today. And there's an interesting topic that I wanted to discuss with you regarding food and beverage in the European sector and also in the UK as well, but also globally as well. Like, as both of us run global companies, we've got clients from multiple locations across the globe. I felt like this is one topic that I'm sure your potential clients would be interested in, and I have a couple of clients in this particular sector. I'm sure
Yeah.
you do as well, so we can discuss and then, yeah, just
Mm.
have a normal conversation.
Sure, sure, sure. Thank you, Rishi, for the introduction, and thanks actually for the invite for this video call slash podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah, the food and beverage industry actually is one of the hot topics areas in business, as you know, and especially when we consider the Chinese market or even like European market, there's always demand for it as
Yeah.
long as the products are good enough in quality and the supply is continuous.
Hmm.
In China especially, like there's this the aspect of like trying different foreign edible products or the drinks, like even this element, maybe it doesn't exist in many markets. Probably one of the unique sides of the Chinese market. Like if, for example, a new product is introduced in the Chinese market, just out of curiosity, a lot of like, yeah, when we say a lot of in China, in Chinese context, it's millions of people.
Exactly.
Out of curiosity, they might like to try that. But when we talk about the European or other markets, this aspect probably is not that strong as in China. So from that perspective, we've seen a lot of successful cases as well. I remember, I think that like this New Zealand company, Australian companies, they just started collaborating with the local KOLs. They are very important in China. So yeah, very successful in selling their products in the first couple of minutes. Actually, 80,000 units, 100,000 units in 1 hour.
Exactly.
That's yeah.
Yeah. So see, the
So
thing is, China is just overall, it's a huge market, same as India with 1.4 billion, in excess of 1.4 billion people. Whereas with the European markets and the US market, US, okay, with 340 million people or 65 million in the UK and 400 million across the EU, there's a lot of
mm,
regulatory red tape involved with particularly like in the Western market. Whereas I suppose there's also regulation in China. But
yeah,
as you
yeah, yeah.
curiosity
So,
element in China,
mm,
and I feel like, people of the Asian descent, and so when it comes to like the Asians or the Chinese or in general, like, people in, because they're so used to eating food in terms of street food and all that, so
mm,
our appetite, or rather like, our immune systems are prone to eating food. So therefore,
yeah,
in terms of a lot of regulation exists in the UK is because of the allergy controls and
mm,
allergens and just overall people like with their health habits and everything. However, that's not
yeah,
something that's of a major concern in the Asian market. Like,
yeah,
if you recall, when we were back in Bali a couple of years back, you used to love the nasi goreng. Now, that nasi goreng particular product would not necessarily be successful, would be successful as a product, but it just
yeah,
as it is in the UK, it wouldn't be approved by the regulatory authorities because of the health and safety reasons. However,
sure,
you were mentioning that away in Bali as if it's like no tomorrow, you were loving it. And
yeah,
similarly in China, all this sticky tofu, and there's just so much food available in China, street food. And if you go to certain markets, it's just like every
yeah,
region of China is a food market in itself.
mm,
So
yeah,
for
exactly.
sure. So regulation is one of the key elements that I feel like, any company that's looking to relocate in terms of or even expand its operations in the
Mm.
European space, regulatory environment is something that they have to like, oversee at with a fine-tooth comb.
Good ones to enter the market, and then the competition itself as well. It's big. It's going to the competition will become more like fair competition for all. So if you're good in production, if your product is good enough, then you can stand the competition. But if not, then obviously you cannot even pass the certification.
Not at all. And exactly, like, with when it comes to food and beverage, especially
Yeah,
food, like
yeah,
two elements that one has to take into consideration. One is the cost, the other one is the taste. If
yeah,
both are hand in hand, your product is going to be successful, no matter what
sure.
market you're in. Because, okay, you might not like one particular element of taste or a food item, but then you like something else. There's always a market because at the end of the day, we all need to eat. We all need
Yeah,
to
exactly.
consume. So it's a consumable market, it's a consumable product. With
Yeah.
respect to the regulation you mentioned, I'm glad that, of course, like I recall that very clearly regarding the baby formula back in 2016 in China. And
Yeah.
regulation is very important. Yes, of course, it's definitely important, which is why October of this year, 1st of October, a new law has been passed, which will go into, it'll be
Mm,
in effect from October 1st of this year in the UK. It's called
mhm,
Natasha's Law. And I'll,
mm,
I'll get to the point why it's called Natasha, but the regulatory environment is such now that anybody that's doing PPDS food, that's
mhm.
pre-packed for direct selling at that point. So if you're
Mhm.
running a food business or like a cafe or something, and you're preparing those sandwiches or food items
Right.
on the premises, and
Yeah.
they're already prepared. So let's say you make the sandwiches early in the morning, and then you're going to sell them for lunchtime coffee or lunchtime with the coffee or something like that. You
Okay.
need the 14 main allergens have to be included.
Mm,
And the reason why it's called Natasha is unfortunately a girl called Natasha passed away a few years back, about 6 years ago. She was traveling from London Heathrow to Nice, France. At
okay.
Heathrow for a Pret a Manger, which is one of the major chains of coffee shop in the UK. She
Yeah.
purchased a sandwich with two of her main flavors, that was olives and artichoke.
Mm,
So she was quite excited the fact that these were two of her main ingredients that she wanted to consume. And when
mm,
she read the ingredients list and everything, it was all good to go.
yeah.
However, the dough contained sesame seeds. She
Okay.
put an anaphylactic reaction to those sesame
Okay.
seeds. Yeah, basically, she just after that shocked, and yeah, she passed away in the plane itself. And then there was a major
Mm,
controversy. Her parents fought hard that how there's a legal loophole because the fact was that that particular sandwich wasn't prepared on the premises. It was prepared outside. And even though it contained all the allergens and it contained like whatever the necessary legal bare minimum requirements, it didn't necessarily say that this
yeah.
contains sesame seeds, which are part of the dough.
Okay.
So that law is being passed, and which will also increase a little bit of regulatory environment, I suppose, a bit more stringent approach towards anybody going into food business. However,
Yeah.
it's important that we want to save
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Natasha in the
important.
future, like, exactly, love her, because at the end of the day, parents lost a daughter.
Nice, nice, nice. And yeah, I think when we compare this different certification, quality assurance, or different the certifications that products need to go through in China, yeah, it reached to this level that depending on the product, there are different requirements, but generally speaking, the government divided the products, like I'm talking about the imported products. So they divided the products into different, for example, let's say supplier countries.
Mm,
I can give you an example. For example, the meat products, they can only come from certain countries. That's like, depending on the product, they are divided into several countries, and
mm,
only those countries can export. So it means that they study the different like abilities of these countries, and also like infrastructure. Like
mm,
for example, chicken feet. It's widely consumable in China and also Southeast Asia, different countries like Vietnam, etc. But chicken feet, because there's so much, demand here, there are only a few countries. Again, China restricted it.
yeah.
So yeah, only from those countries it buys. Why? The reason behind it, they studied the infrastructure, and they learned that only some countries, they have the facility to keep that or produce that or package that product. which
There's too many elements, Jasur. It's the quality control and supply chain management. And I believe the reason why it's only, I believe Brazil is one of the major exporters for chicken feet from Brazil to
yeah,
China, and China
yeah,
imports that. It's because
yeah,
of the quality control and again the supply chain management. It's not the fact that Brazil is so far out from China.
mm,
It's not the logistic element. It's just the fact that Brazil has, as you mentioned, it has the facilities. And two major certifications that are required are the BRC, and then there is the FDA approval, which is of course the global data, and BRC is also global. So those certifications are quite important
yeah.
because of those
They,
certifications and the fact that those facilities, well, not everybody's able to get that. There's a reason why Mercedes, BMW, Audi are better cars than other cars because the fact that they have the production, not just production capacity, but more so this the quality control. When they make something, they make it like everything is just perfected.
mhm,
Exactly. As it's a consumable product, you're eating, and same for skincare. Like
yeah,
skincare regulation is increasing heavily in India these days. The regulation just
mhm,
keeps on going up and up and up. So with respect to the
yeah,
BRC, like British Retail Consortium, that's the full form of that. It was established back in 1998. And that
mhm,
particular relevant authority, it's a global accredited body that has 21,000 certified institution centers across the globe. And any
right,
particular food product that wants to start exporting into major markets, so that's just the Western market or the US market, it's a global recognized as equivalent as the FDA. You need a BRC certificate. There's obviously a lengthy process to it. It's not something that you just apply online and get it, but that's
mhm,
the whole purpose of it. It's not for everybody and anybody to get it.
yeah,
I've got two clients, and one of them we're working on getting the BRC certification at the moment currently, and another one of they already have that. They have the BRC and the FDA certificate.
okay,
And for any company that's willing to expand into this particular space, you need to have a BRC certificate. So when you go talk to the major supermarket chains, such
mhm,
as Tesco, Sainsbury, Asda, all the UK retail
yeah.
stores, you need to have a BRC certificate. Without that, they won't entertain you.
Is it possible to speak to them? Let's start from here because if you compare this aspect to China, in China there are like a lot of like the supermarket or even like hypermarket chains.
Yes,
But the problem is sometimes it's impossible to talk to them.
yes.
First of all, like physically, it's impossible to talk to them because you approach them and they say, "Oh, we are not responsible for it. Please go and speak to the management." You try to go to another office, you get the same response. So you need to use in China. That's the way you need to use certain like channels that's built through relationships, etc., to reach the management. Otherwise, impossible.
So, see, the buyers are such because they have so many products available to them. So, buyers for any particular chain of supermarkets, it's always a competitive area to enter into the space, like even talking to them. So, in exactly same as in China, you have to build that rapport, that guanxi. Similarly
Yeah.
here. Now, it's taken me a while to develop those relationships. I've developed a very good relationship with one of the major supermarket chains in Eastern Europe. They've got roughly about 3,000 stores. And
Right.
even the UK have developed with certain stores, maybe not to the level of Tesco or Supermart or Sainsbury yet, but you have to
Mhm.
circumnavigate, and then you do that by going through the distributors. Now,
Sure.
distributors eat a lot of margin for sure, but at least your product is out there. So,
Mm.
would you rather have 10% of something or 0% of nothing? It takes a lot of, as you know yourself, hard work and commitment and dedication because obviously they're not just like, even though my name is Rishi, but it's not Sunak. So, and
Mhm.
again, that's where the relationship building and everything that's where
Yeah,
it's
yeah, absolutely,
important.
absolutely. Same in our situation. That's the reason why I asked you. Like maybe in Europe, it's more. I thought maybe it's standardized things like that. But yeah, so in China as well, we had to go through a lot of like relationship building, etc., etc. So that's how you approach them. And talking about like, okay, you assuming you contacted them and they agreed to take the product, the aftermath is also very important because
Of course.
this big supermarket chains, their requirements usually, you know, not like, selling in a small store. Their requirements usually like the supplier, they need to have a the warehouse here,
Mm.
and that warehouse, like the amount of the product should be kept in that warehouse is dictated by the supermarket chain.
Yes.
And yeah, depending on the location, they are, letting you, enter this supermarket. They study the demand, and based on that, they tell you, okay, this much product you have to first bring to this warehouse and then store it. And then the next challenge comes in the form of the payment.
Mm.
Like supermarket chains, I don't know, in the UK, maybe you can share later on this aspect. In China, they pay you um, every quarter.
Mm.
They don't pay you upfront. So it's kind of, they sell your product, and then every quarter, this is an example.
Yeah.
Some of them, they pay you every 90 days.
Yes.
So like
Same in Europe.
so yeah, they sell the product first and then they pay you.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, sometimes when we're talking about the big, supermarket stores, these are the some challenging aspects the suppliers need to consider
Mm.
if they're not ready to meet the challenges. Because in some of the clients we introduced, for example, in here to German and French supermarkets,
Yeah.
um, after a lot of negotiations, a lot of like back and forth communication, um, they couldn't meet the requirements. We spent a lot of time, introducing this product, but then they said, well, supermarkets requirements are too high, we cannot go for it. So there are always alternatives. I'm saying not the supermarkets are great, etc. Traditional way to
Mm.
introduce products to the local community, local people, but alternative ways are always there, like e-commerce.
E-commerce is a major one.
Yeah,
E-commerce,
it's
especially
the
like in the
yeah,
Asian markets, such as
yeah,
India's and China's, like it's e-com. You start with e-commerce, and then you
yeah,
go into supermarkets. It's the reverse.
yeah.
However, in Europe, we're still a bit old school. So you start off with like physical stores and then e-commerce, because the e-commerce technological the infrastructure is not as developed, unfortunately.
Mhm.
In China, you order on hard drive, let's say from SanDisk at 2 p.m. local time, you get it by 5 p.m. In the UK, you order at 2 p.m. one day, it comes 2 p.m. or 5 p.m. 2 days later. So the e-commerce
Now,
network,
now in China is actually much faster.
there you go.
JD, for example, JD.com, they have their local stores in almost every neighborhood.
Yeah,
So if I go on JD and order literally anything,
yeah,
including food and beverage products,
yeah,
the product comes here within minutes.
yeah.
So I don't have to really wait hours anymore.
That and
You
also
know.
drone delivery, which is quite a major one in China. So
Mm.
it's just the ease of like the e-commerce and the whole framework and the infrastructure is designed in such a mechanism in China. However, in the UK, it's not as developed, unfortunately, yet. But UK has something which is a major market, and so does Europe, and they pay you in euros and pounds. So therefore,
Yeah.
there's this advantage of the currency advantage, and currency, obviously, you're avoiding the currency risk by
Nice.
dealing in this market.
Mm. Okay, so let's talk about now specific cases, for example.
Mm.
Um, let's assume we have like clients from literally, every part of the world, and some of the clients are now like they are from Central Asia. But okay, if you have any specific
No, go for it.
recommendations for people, for example, who want to enter the UK market
Mm.
with their food and beverage products, prepackaged, obviously, from Central Asia.
Yeah.
Um, let's say the product is chocolates and biscuits,
Yes.
to keep it simple. In reality, actually, we have such clients. We
Yes.
have such clients who are interested in selling their products in as many as possible
Sure.
markets, including China, UK, etc. So, what are the requirements, or what are the like suggested steps would be?
Yeah. So the step will be, first of all, they would have to be BRC approved. Now, how to circumnavigate the BRC requirement is if you don't have the resources or the means, financial and also the physical infrastructure, you
Yeah.
outsource your manufacturing to someone that is already BRC approved. So
Okay.
let's say if my kitchen is BRC approved, and you want to make nasi goreng in my kitchen, you come to my kitchen and do it rather than doing it in your kitchen because you don't
But
necessarily.
they do already have their production in the country, like in
Production is
Uzbekistan.
different. BRC certification and the requirements is more stricter. They will definitely
Okay.
have the production, but are they BRC approved facility?
So if they want, is there any possibility
Of
to
course.
invite these people into their factory and then go through
Yeah.
the checks?
So how it works with the BRC. So I was just like giving the loophole, but like how it works with BRC is BRC stands for British Retail Consortium, and you need to have 3 months of data before you can invite someone. So how it
Okay.
works with BRC's initial step is you find out what product you want to focus on, the SKUs. Then they
Mhm.
do an audit of you need to be a HACCP approved body. So how it works is hazard analysis, critical
Mhm.
control point.
Okay.
So you have to hire a consultant that is like, is an expert in BRC. So I do that
Mhm.
with my clients because the reason is a lot of clients, they want to avoid that particular element. Like, well, we'll just look up at the requirements online and we'll do it
Mhm.
ourselves. So let's say
Mhm.
if you want to sell chocolates, as you mentioned, now you might have 5 different flavors in chocolates. You need to have be BRC approved for all the different flavors. So your machinery will have to be approved.
Okay.
Yes, I'll start off with. So how it works with BRC is a British Retail Consortium. You
Mhm.
need to be HACCP. So you have to
Mhm.
measure your quality control and your hygiene standards have to meet international standards and your supply
Okay.
chain management. So with
Okay.
BRC, let's say you're doing chocolates and that chocolate contains hazelnut, for example.
Mhm.
It's good to get those hazelnuts from a BRC approved vendor. A.
Mhm.
B, regarding your chocolates, your machinery, the overall element infrastructure, that has to be BRC approved. So you cannot just
Mhm.
randomly invite the BRC accredited body. So it's a
Okay.
British Retail Consortium. So there'll be a BRC approved accredited body in, let's say, Uzbekistan, Central Asia, where they
Mhm.
want to get the BRC. You cannot just randomly invite them. You need to
Mhm.
show 3 months of data. So your machines will have to go through stringent quality control and hygiene control measures.
Okay.
It's good to get some courses as well and to
Mhm.
understand the overall points, what's required to get that BRC certificate. That
Okay.
includes like even wearing the cap, the
Mhm.
clothes and everything. You cannot just make it at home and like, start selling and packaging and distribution.
Sure.
So that's that. So you need 3 months of data for that. So let's say if they want to start off and order, one particular body in Uzbekistan has the machines. To get that
Mhm.
BRC, first of all, they'll have to show the hazard analysis, whether they're
Mhm.
meeting that element,
All
critical
right.
control. What's going to happen if something were to go wrong in the business? Whether they have the necessary plans and measure. What if someone were to die at your production facility? Do you have any particular plans for that, for example? Machines, there might be some like really dangerous machines which need like the manpower has to be a skilled manpower, skilled man force to be able to operate that machine. You need to be able to show all those points.
Okay.
After that, then once you hire the consultants, they prepare you to file that regulatory documents for BRC approval. So it's not just
Mhm.
on an application, you fill a form and you pay with your Alipay or WeChat or whatever, and you get that. No. To fill out a form, let's say if you're selling chocolates, and let's say you get a BRC for chocolates and then suddenly start selling snack bars which contain chocolate, you have to
Okay.
invite again. You cannot
Mhm.
just get the same certification for two because they're considered two different products. So if it's
Right.
burger and you're selling roast chicken, for example, you still need another body and someone that has an expertise in roast chicken to give you that
Mhm.
BRC approval. And they do the audit is it's basically 2 visits. So they come once just to understand your hazard control, quality control, supply chain management, and then the another just to be overall look and analysis. And then you get the certificate, which is valid for 2 years. And once you are BRC approved, you're good to go
Mhm.
and sell in any particular country because it's a global recognized certificate.
Has to be renewed every 2 years.
It has to
Same process to renew.
same process. But then the
They
second
audit again, they check again, everything, right?
everything. So basically, they want to ensure that you're maintaining. So let's say if someone like, and especially people
Maintaining
from
the
the in
quality. Okay.
maintain the quality because otherwise people will cut corners to save the cost.
Okay.
So once you got the BRC certificate, the action game starts now where when you go into different supermarket chains, so we have two German chains in the UK called Lidl and Aldi.
Yeah.
With Lidl and Aldi, how it
Aldi
works.
is in China as well.
Aldi's in China is nowadays, exactly, you're right. Yeah. So Lidl and Aldi, they pay you after 90 days, just
Mm,
like every quarter, just like the Chinese supermarkets. However, Lidl and Aldi cater more towards lower middle class and middle class kind of families,
yeah.
where Tesco would be your middle class slash upper middle class these days with the cost of living crisis. And then the
Yeah.
two major ones is Harrods, Selfridges, Waitrose,
Mm,
they would be considered for the premium. And
premium.
you can, so how it works is, for example, Harrods will sell bananas for or apples for £9 a kilo.
Mm.
The same apples you'll be able to buy in Tesco for £1.50, and the
Yeah.
same apples you'll be able to buy in Lidl for £1. So it's the same
Yeah.
apples, sourced from the
Same.
same particular production facility in somewhere in Europe, but the fact that it's the location which matters. So
Mm.
this is where it's quite important from a business perspective and strategy perspective, sir.
Rishi, can I pause a little bit here? Before we go ahead and discuss other topics, I want to clarify one thing. You mentioned this BRC certificate, right?
Hmm.
Um, Regarding the costs now, that we understand that, for example, if a client hires an agent or consultant, that's one thing.
Hmm.
But are there any costs involved with the agency itself, like government body?
So
Do
the
they have to
government,
pay every two
yes.
years or something like that? Yeah.
So there is BRC fees for sure, Jasur. And with the BRC fees, it varies from product to product and what kind of audit is required. For
Mhm.
example, if Nestle wants to get BRC approved, obviously, which it is, their cost will be substantially higher than, let's say, someone starting a business from their kitchen or from their
Is
garage.
it because the size of the business?
Yes. Size
Okay.
and also the what's required in terms of audit. It's not just basically coming and having a look. It's not when we went to see that property in Shanghai, we just had a quick look in half an hour. It's basically the size and what's required. And then it's a 300 point plan, basically, like checklist.
Okay.
It's 300 points, but those 300 points, each point is probably an industry in itself for like Nestle.
Hmm.
Whereas 200 points for like a small business is just like a checklist.
But
So
can you give an idea what is the cost might be for, like, let's say for a factory which has 1,000 workers?
1,000 workers, you're talking about at least $10,000, give or
Okay.
take, eight to ten
Every
thousand
two
dollars
years,
every two
right?
years. Yes, every 2 years to get that certificate. Yeah, that includes everything. That's a BRC, the approval, the audit, and everything, all the paperwork and everything. So about 8 to 10,000 minimum. Yeah, for 1,000 workers, easily.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. This is just to give an idea to the audience who might be watching this. So this, yeah, $8 to $10,000, or maybe possibly $15,000 if the factory is bigger, right?
It could
Mm.
be lower. It could be lower. It depends. Like, see, if you have the necessary precautions in
And
place.
on top of that, we need to add the consultant
Of
fees
course.
as well.
But see, without the consultant, it's like, if you go without the consultant would know what documents are required. So your chances of securing that BRC certificate increase substantially to 98, 99%.
They might get rejected as well.
See, there's no guarantee, but with the consultant, it's 99%. So let's say, for example, I'll give an analogy of visas. Let's say an Afghani national wants to apply for a US visa, okay? Afghani national for a US visa. If an Afghani national goes directly to the US embassy, what are the chances of getting that visa?
Well, of course. I mean, that's yeah.
If you go to a
Consultant
agent, if you go to a
necessarily
consultant, the chances increase. There's no guarantee that the Afghani national will get the visa for US. So similarly for the BRC.
yeah.
But one of my clients, they are a major client in India from Gujarat, the province where Prime Minister Modi is from, and their ARR is roughly about a couple of million pounds a year. And they have the BRC certificate. Their production facility is top notch. Their employee workers, they maintain all the quality control, hygiene. For them, getting a BRC certificate is like getting another piece of paper. However, a newer client, they will have to go through that process. And once it's just the first one, which is the complicated process, but after that, it's just a renewal. And if you maintain the same standards, then getting the renewal is, you don't need a
And
consult
also, I would like to add one point. Hiring a consultant sometime, because we run, although it's a
consultancy.
corporate
Exactly.
legal consultancy, sometimes people underestimate the power of a consultant. For example, doing the applications and filling out forms, etc. These are technical things. Beside giving expert advice, consultants bring resources to the table as well. Like
Yes.
we mentioned, for example, in this food and beverage industry, if the company would like to enter the supermarket chain, it's nearly impossible in every country. You need to know the key people, right?
Mhm.
So this is what we bring to the table. We know the key people, we know who to talk to, and there is a guarantee that when we knock on the door will be opened. So that sort of package the clients will be getting. Yeah.
And the door will be open because of you, Jasur, because of me, Rishi and Jasur. The door will be open because of the product or the company or the country of origin. The door is open, and that's we have worked out over the last 10 years to
There are,
develop.
there are millions of there are millions of products, to be honest, like everywhere, and the
Exactly.
quality might not be an issue, even the certificate. But it's like who it's the matter. Yeah,
It's all
boils
about the
down to
network. It's all about the network.
the
And when you
network.
charge for consultants, I get clients all the time. Like,
Literally,
my
products compete with each other to enter this chain.
exactly. And you have clients all the time. I have clients all the time. Like, my rates are higher. I'm like, I have clients that are paying higher. Because at the end of the day, they underestimate the power of the connections. They
Yeah.
underestimate the power of consultancy. Because we're speaking doesn't necessarily mean it's for free. And that's why it's
Mhm.
quite important, like, with the initial consultation is
Exactly.
charged, because
Exactly.
otherwise they will not appreciate your time. And time is of essence here.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. So yeah, thank you. I mean, let's assume that they got the certificate. What is the next step after that?
The next step after that would be for, especially for the European market, is as we just mentioned, the connections and just the distribution. Now, when it comes to distribution, the first container might be easy, as you mentioned, like, the warehouse and everything. It's the
Mhm.
timeline, the shelf life. On average, the shelf life should be of 12 to 18 months. 18 months ideally, 12 months to the minimum, because it takes roughly 3 months for the goods to be landed in the UK, like, by sea shipping and everything, distribution, warehousing, just logistics and everything. So you're probably losing about 2 months, 60 days, 40 to 60 days in that. So if
Okay.
you have a product that has a shelf life of 6 months, you've lost
Mm.
2 months, it's only valid for 4 months. So you're just reducing the time. If it's valid for 12 months, we're on to a winner. And if it's
Okay.
18 months, it's definitely going to sell. So
Mm.
shelf life is quite important for any particular product. After the shelf life, it's always easy to send out the first batch of samples or first batch of the order. So let's say if you're selling chocolates, the first container is very easy, but it's the
Mhm.
pallets after that. Does the
Mm.
production facility have logistically the
Mm.
resources to be able to sell the first container, let's say from Uzbekistan to UK is
Yeah.
$2,500, okay, give or take. The first
Mm.
container, $2,500. What about the pallet after that? Because that pallet will not necessarily come as a full container. It might come through air shipping, which will increase the substantial cost substantially,
Cost will be different. Yeah.
and it's going to be different. So therefore, you have to prepare to lose some money for subsequent orders, like maybe 2 or 3 orders after that, the pallets, just to be
Mm.
able to get in that market share. And one thing that people underestimate is that sometimes you have to invest some money. I'm not talking about consultancies. I'm talking about investing in the product and in just the distribution element,
Yeah.
because there's something called a distribution fee, listing
Yeah,
fee.
of course, of
And
course.
that listing fee is quite important, you see. Now, you might say that just because that particular person is known to Rishi and Jasur, they're going to avoid that listing fee. No, it's not the case. Because at the end of the day, those supermarkets are there to make a business and make a living. Therefore, they have to charge. So
Yeah.
these are the costs involved. That would be the next step, is to estimate the listing costs, the
Mm.
palette, whether you have the resources to be able to send. If you have the
Yeah.
resources to be able to send, you're onto a winner. What's going to happen afterwards is getting the necessary distribution channels in order in the particular supermarket chains. And this is
Mhm.
where it's important, is the placement of the products. Whether your product is a premium product or a lower end of the product, whether you want to sell a BYD or a
Mm.
Mercedes or an Audi or a Land Rover or a Range Rover. It depends like what exactly. So where you want to place your product. So it's very important in terms of the product placement. That strategy has to be top notch. For
And
example, if
obviously,
you want to sell a chocolate product and that's equivalent of, let's say, 50p.
mm.
Now that 50p, where is it going to go? Little or Aldi, or whether that's going to go into Tesco? The consumer that's going to walk into the Tesco's, for them 50p might be pocket change, but the consumer that might walk into Lidl, 50p might be something substantial. And a consumer that might walk into Halfords, sorry, Harrods or Selfridges or Waitrose even, for them 50p, they won't even consider their product because for them, they're just like whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, pricing strategy has to be top notch.
Of course. And of course, there's a legal aspect to entering the supermarket chain, right? Before the product is stored, before the product is introduced to the chain, the company will have to go through like a trademark registration, company formation, etc. in the UK locally. Correct?
The company formation, yes, definitely. The company will have to incorporate a company in the UK, but that's baby steps like that. Even without sending the products, you'll have to start a presence.
Yeah.
You'll have to develop an e-commerce platform because
Mhm.
while you're in the UK, you're not going to operate from an e-commerce platform from China, for example, or
Yeah.
Uzbekistan, for example. So e-commerce platform, company incorporation, bank accounts. So
Yeah.
those things, of course, that's like, stage one of the whatever before BRC or
Yeah,
before anything
I'm
else.
mentioning this because some companies might not even consider that because when
Mm,
we're talking about like opening a bank account in the UK, that's like it requires somebody who need to travel there, like
yes.
company director of that, the representative of the company. It means that potentially this company who want to enter the European market, specifically UK, they need to consider hiring a team of
Mm.
people there, at least a small team that can, manage this business for them, basically the supply, maybe talk to the supermarkets, etc. And maybe they're not located there full time, but at least they have to consider that. Obviously, that adds as a cost to them. Yeah,
See, it pays to those costs are basically an investment. Consider as an investment because the
yeah,
rewards are such huge rewards after like a couple of years where you're just raking in the profits.
yeah.
Let me give you an example of Pakistani mangoes. I don't know, have you ever consumed Pakistani mangoes?
I don't know. I might have
Okay.
in China because most of
No, Chinese mangoes are mostly from China, from south of China itself. They don't necessarily import, but I believe from Pakistani mangoes are
no, we
probably
shop from foreign
okay,
supermarkets,
okay,
Lidl, for
okay.
example, Metro. Yeah,
Right. So Pakistani mangoes are one of the most prized commodities that comes out from Pakistan. They're from
sure.
Pakistan, they go through a lot of regulatory process. It's quite important for them to go through that regulatory process because
Mhm.
otherwise, like this quality control and supply chain in Pakistan is not as strict as in Europe, but the taste
Yeah.
is good. And then the placement. Now, Pakistani mangoes are mostly sold in Pakistani stores, Asian stores, Indian stores.
Okay.
However, if you go to Tesco's, they won't necessarily have the product. So it's quite important with the product placement. You may not necessarily need a company incorporated for Pakistani mangoes. If you're a Pakistani mango distribution company in Pakistan or for a Pakistani mango company, you just find a local
Yeah.
distributor. So it's also important to get a local distributor as well in the
Mhm.
UK or in Europe, which will help you to
Yeah.
be able to distribute that product. So you need a
Okay.
team for sure, which is an added cost. You need that company, you need that bank account, obviously, to be able to trade and process and everything. Also,
Sure.
one major element is just with the logistic partner as well. You need to have a very
Sure.
robust logistics partner to be able to get your
Of
goods
course.
in and out.
Of
See,
course.
the port itself is quite relatively easy. Felixstowe Port in the UK or Southampton Port, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can send it from Uzbekistan, you can send it from China, wherever your product's from, India, for example. Getting the
Yeah.
goods into the UK is not an issue, but
Mhm.
then what goes afterwards, the distribution
Mhm.
element is quite important. And the formula
Yeah.
is for distribution that you have to be careful. You cannot overprice your product. You cannot
Mhm.
underprice your product.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the pricing is it. And then if you're going to create a pricing war, just say because oh, Cadbury sells chocolate for £1.50, I'm going to sell for a pound. It's not going to work.
Mhm.
Cadbury sells
Okay.
1.50 because there's this inherent pricing with the brand.
Mm.
So you have to
How
be,
much
yes,
percent? Okay, I'm talking about. Okay, so while I'm listening to you regarding the costs, I'm in my head, I'm doing
yes.
calculations. So I'm wondering how much percent, the products, for example, sold in Aldi um, are imported.
In general, not just
In
Aldi,
general,
UK,
just
in, yeah, of
just to give
course.
an idea. Yeah.
In general,
Because
UK.
I'm thinking instead of like going through all these costs and hassle, because the shelf life, you're losing time and there are leftovers definitely.
Hmm.
And in Europe, specifically in UK, there's like a fee to dispose your product even. Um, Maybe, just maybe, they might consider production locally, keeping the brand name.
So I will
Maybe,
get to that point.
yeah, produce it nearby.
You have
Yeah,
raised a very valid point, and I'll get to that point. So when you're talking about the production locally, the pricing and everything, it's quite important to, but you can only start production locally if you have the necessary means. Eastern Europe is the perfect example for that, for EU law perspective, because
oh,
it's cheaper cost of production, cheaper cost of labor, and Europe as a continent is relatively small. A flight to
yeah,
Turkey, which is Asia, is 4 hours. So you can imagine, like a flight to, I can drive to Paris. I can take the
yeah.
12 o'clock ferry. Ferry takes an hour and
Mm,
15 minutes, and then it's another 2.5 hours. The port from my house is hour and a half. So hour and a half plus hour and a half, that's 3 hours plus three. So in 6 hours, I can reach Paris, which is a different country altogether. But in China,
yeah.
6 hours gets you nowhere. So therefore, yeah, so the logistics is quite important, but also, production locally is a valid point that you raised, but you can only start production locally if you have the necessary means. You have to have the whole infrastructure set up. I'm not talking about just about the machines, but you have to know the right partners who are going to help you source the right warehouse, the office space, everything, because you're not just going to start production facility in a random middle of nowhere. You have to know the right places where you're going to do it. Yes, you will save some time, but you have to balance between whether you're going to save time with producing locally versus shipping. So it's going to definitely help you with the shelf life. But what about added cost? So you have to factor into account. And this is where you need a consultant like ourselves to be able to help you with the financial planning to
Yeah,
be able to then enter that particular market and in that mechanism.
of course.
Sorry, you were
Of course.
saying
I mean,
another
because
point.
in entering the UK market compared to Chinese market is, to be honest, it might be slightly costlier
Yeah,
for somebody's located in Central Asia,
yeah,
because of the proximity.
yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking about. If the brand is stronger, then they might consider like Eastern Europe, small production there, so that it makes sense. Otherwise, for them, Chinese market is easier,
Hmm.
probably less, costly.
Yeah,
But still, it comes down to the brand and what's the plan for the expansion, to
indeed.
be honest.
And you mentioned about wastage, Jasur. So wastage on average, UK sorry, imports about 48 to 50% of its food. It's not a
Mm,
self-sufficient food producing country. So if
sure.
the borders were to be closed tomorrow, UK would not be able to produce enough food to be able to sustain its own population of 70 million people.
Right.
So
Mhm.
that's that. Wastage, let's not talk about that. UK on average wastes about 170,000 tons just of fruits and vegetables. Just fruits and
Mm,
vegetables. Not
mm,
milk, no water, not anything else. So there's a huge cost of wastage involved. And you're right with the disposal fee as well of the wastage products. The biggest problem is of the wastage because of the increased scrutiny and the regulation element. Once you go through all that process, so let's say milk, for example, the best before date is 30th of June. Now, you and I
yeah.
both know that milk is also good to go a day or two after that as well. You'll still be able to
Yeah.
consume that in your coffee or tea. But we have a major chunk of the population that would just dispose that milk there in itself, which that milk will have a substantial value in India and China, not necessarily China, but let's say India and Africa. So therefore,
Yeah.
the wastage element is quite important.